And I've got you on the air. Okay, great. Travis, I want to thank you for taking time to be with me this morning. Now, are you going to be speaking today?
I am.
Are you reading, doing a reading, I think, later today?
I am. I'm doing a reading at 11 o'clock
And it's from your
this
book,
morning.
The Burden of Speech.
Uh-huh.
It's a collection of poems. Is this your, it says debut collection, so this is your first time out with doing a project like this?
It was my first collection of poems, and I have a new one actually coming out in the fall of next year.
Well, tell us
So I'll
about
be,
that one too.
um, this one I think is well, I'm a lot happier with this collection. Honestly, I love the first collection, but I see a lot of growth with this second collection. I'm more deliberate. I didn't wait for the poems to come to me, but I had to go after the poems. Just actively seek out poems for this book, and I think these are a bit more controlled than the first. But still has the same groundswell. I'm still really excited about the first book, but of course the new one is it's the new child. So
Right.
I'm favoring it today.
Well, I love the titles of the poems. God of Small Things, things like that. I love the titles and I love the subjects. I found one about a couple of days ago online. I Trade My Family for Junk.
Uh huh.
These are great. They're just great titles and great poems. I traded my grandmother for a purse full of used Kleenex. I mean, where do you get these ideas? They're great.
That's a great question. Actually, Andrew Wyeth, the painter, when he would do a self portrait, what he would do rather than paint someone, he would study this person, interview them, or interview the family, depending on whether or not they were still alive, and he would choose something that meant a lot to that particular person, or something that represented them, like a sailor. He might just paint a pair of boots in a corner. Now, so I took that idea just a little bit further, and I reduced my family to things that I had noticed about them or things that they carried over the years. And my grandmother, there was a purse full of used Kleenex, essentially, or wadded up Kleenex, and her purse was full of them. And when she passed, my mother and I were looking through her purse and cleaning things out, and it was still full of those Kleenexes, and that's all we have left are people's things when they're gone.
And the things become so much a part of our lives. They're almost like members of the family
Hmm.
in your poem. That's pretty fun. For those who listened, we have a lot of writers and poets and spoken word artists out there that are looking for advice. You're finding poetry in everyday things and some of the quirky things of life. What kind of advice can you give to someone who's writing and they're struggling sometimes for inspiration?
Well, we all struggle for inspiration, that's for sure. The more poems you write, the more inspiration you need. And I mentioned earlier about with the second book having to really go out and actively seek the poems out because they just didn't come to me like they did when I first started. It's like a drug, you just have to dig deeper and go further. So to do that, I read a lot. Read a lot of poems. I like to travel, open myself up to experience, that sort of thing. So my advice would be to read as much as you can and to write like crazy. Write like every day is your last opportunity to put pen to page.
That's great advice. When you're working on a piece, how do you know when a poem is overworked? I hear that a lot when someone is struggling with their writing. It sounds fresh when they first put it down, and then they start editing and moving things around, and then it becomes so overworked that they kind of lose what the whole thing is all about. How do you overcome something like that?
That's a tough question. And knowing when to stop, it's almost like some sort of magic. Um, I don't know that I can answer that. For me, the life goes out of it. There's no excitement in the piece anymore, and
Okay.
um, the way that I guard against that is I do not show my poems to anyone
Oh, okay.
until I think they're as good as they're going to get. Um, on my end, and then I
Mhm.
need other people's advice, and I welcome that advice, but at the same time I'm really guarded about the advice that I take from them, because I am afraid of that, the life going out, or the poem, like as you say, being just overworked. And I'm always afraid that I'll lose my groundswell for a poem if I work on it too much.
Right. And when did you know that you had your voice, so to speak? Because a lot of times when someone is getting started, they read a lot of work from other people and they're concerned about sounding like someone else because that person is their favorite poet or writer or whatever. And their work becomes so a part of their thinking that it's almost mechanical. They start sounding like that other person. How do you make sure that you stay true to your individual voice, and how did you know when you found your voice in poetry?
I think that any decent poet or writer does have a legitimate anxiety of influence, of not wanting to sound like someone else or sound new. And when we first start writing, that's all we have is what we've read before, and we do find certain writers that we admire and we want to sound like them. But I once had a professor who told me that I needed to work really hard at finding my voice. He said, because Travis, once you find it, you're stuck with it. You can't change it, and that's who you're going to be as a poet. And if you find a voice that's just not exciting or new, that's the kind of poet you're going to be. Um,
well,
so,
well, that didn't happen with you, obviously.
mm,
Well, let me ask this last question, and then we'll talk about what you're going to be doing there at the fair. Um, for your work and where you find inspiration, who is it that you go to find inspiration when you're reading, when you're looking to read something and you want to be inspired or something that will entertain you? Who do you read?
wow, to be entertained. Well, one of my dear friends, I actually have had the pleasure of working with this gentleman for about 8 years now. It's Thomas Lux, the poet. I love his work. He's a wonderful mentor, very generous man. So I love to read Thomas Lux. Gerald Stern is another of my favorite poets. I love his poetic voice. I love the way that he uses places in poems, and actually uses names of people that he's met throughout his life, or friends and family. So I like Gerald Stern. Other poets that I go to. I'm trying to think what I'm reading right now. I like Billy Collins. I like Billy Collins quite a lot. Stuart Deschelles is one of my favorite poets writing today. Dean Young. I love Dean Young, Tony
Okay.
Hoagland.
Okay. And for the young people out there that want to know this question, they want the answer to this question, can you really make a living doing this?
Absolutely not. Being a poet, if you're going to be just a poet, you have to be willing to take that vow of poverty. Uh, but luckily, there's a system set up for poets, and it's called the university system, and uh, and that's tremendously helpful, and that keeps you going. It's a paycheck as well, but there are also wonderful perks. I mean, there's travel involved, and you get to come to places like this at the
Right.
Miami Book Festival, and meet a lot of people, and I think that experiences like that make me rich. Um, but it's pretty easy as a poet to hit the ceiling, your earning ceiling, quickly. So yeah, but can you make a living at it? If you don't love it, if if you can't imagine a day going by with you not doing it, writing poetry, then find something else to do.
Right.
You're going to be happier, making more money, and living the high life. But there's a certain downside to it. But I can't really say it's a downside either.
Right. Now, at the Miami Book Fair, have you been to the fair before? Is this your first time, or is this
I have not been to the Miami Book Fair before. I've not. As a matter of fact, this is my first time in Miami.
Oh, okay.
And I arrived last night, I guess about 12:30 or 1 a.m.
Oh,
And so I've just now actually seen the sun in Miami, so and seen the landscape. So I'm looking forward to getting out and getting around after my reading this morning.
right, and meeting everyone. It's a tremendous event. Lynn will make sure that you get everywhere you're supposed to be, And I'm sure you're going to enjoy it and make a lot of new friends there. Thanks for sharing your time with us this morning.
Hey, thanks a lot, Barbara. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
Hey, thank you. You too.
Bye bye.